They don't care about what's actually going on. If they actually did, they would do something about it. But they don't do anything. They just tweet until their thumbs fall off. Like, there's nothing, like, if they had an actual solution, then I would be like, oh, okay, like, they're doing something. They're creating their own production company. But they're not. They're just complaining and then turning on Game of Thrones. That's all they're doing. Welcome to Coffee and Dates podcast. I am Adil.
I'm Fatima.
This is a podcast where we drink coffee and eat dates and talk about stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about Muslims in mainstream media.
Yes. Okay, so Adil, why can't we as a Muslim community agree on what good representation is?
Why can't we agree on it? It's because we're an indecisive, divided community overall. That's what I think. What do you think?
So I think that the issue is being a Muslim is different for each person. So what I view as good representation of, like my Muslim experience is very different than someone else's. So if I gave like the exact replica of my life and I was like, this is, my, autobiography or whatever, and someone would watch that and be like, well, that's not good Muslim representation, I feel like they would be in their right to say that because they've had a very different experience. But I don't think that means that's not good Muslim representation. I just think it means it's not their experience, which is what like everyone gets so triggered by.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to understand like the Muslim American experience. We're just talking about Americans. The Muslim American experience is very diverse. People come from all kinds of backgrounds. A lot of people are, from different countries. Their families are from different countries. They're different races. They have different family situations. They have different religious upbringings. All these things are so different and vast in the Muslim community in America that there's not just like one, like, oh, this is what it's like to be Muslim in America. Like, and I think like, recently there's been, a lot of TV shows that have been coming out and movies that like kind of show Muslims in a light that a lot of people get upset by or triggered by. But Muslims have been in mainstream media for a while, like.
Okay, what do you mean?
Like, in music, there's a lot of Muslim rappers, a lot of Muslim jazz musicians. They've been representing Muslims for a long time.
Like, okay, but here's the thing. When you're doing a different profession and you happen to be Muslim, I think that's different than when you're saying, hey, this is me representing Muslims. You know what I mean?
I mean, okay, but like who is actually claiming that? It's like you can't. Is it impossible to be a Muslim and to go onto mainstream media without that thing attached to you? Like,
no,
so
you
if I go out and like, make a TV show, is it gonna be like, okay, Adil, now you're representing Muslims, like show us what you got?
It depends on what your TV show's about. If your TV show is about, some, I don't know, like brown guy trying to make it and stand up or whatever, and like all of his antics, like I think that's different than like, oh, a brown guy that's like very, conflicted about his faith, and it's like a big part of each episode, and like you have sheikhs involved.
Okay, you don't have to be too on the nose here. I think we all know what you're talking about. But let's say I get your point. But let's say in my show that like, you're saying, oh, this brown guy trying to make it in stand-up comedy type thing. What if I show scenes of me praying and then of me skipping prayer, like clearly skipping prayer, like they show me a whole evening without praying Maghrib or whatever, like would that be, what is that like something that's like, oh hey, like you shouldn't do that, you're Muslim on TV, so you should be showing that you pray Maghrib? Like is that negative then, even if my show is not about like, oh, me struggling with my faith?
I mean, I think that's a tough question to answer, honestly. But I think my point was to address the fact that, for example, you're talking about jazz musicians and rappers. They're not, like, being Muslim is not their central experience as people see them. That's not the first thing that they're describing them as, Like, even, like, the most famous Muslim athletes. Like being Muslim for a lot of them is not their first thing that people would characterize them as. There are a few where they've made their they have used or not used they've definitely promoted the religion and they'll talk about it and talk about their experience with it, but for a lot of them and for a lot of these people that you're talking about, it's not the same.
Yeah, but I like jazz musicians maybe not, because there's no lyricism behind their music. They're just playing. You're not really thinking, oh, what is this person thinking, or what do they believe in. But in music, there's a lot of especially rappers. They mention that they're Muslim. They talk about Islam in their music. They say Arabic words in their music, stuff like that. There's a lot of that stuff with Muslim rappers. For example, Lupe Fiasco. Mm-hmm. He literally starts a song by saying Astaghfirullah. In his first mainstream album that he put out, he says that. And I don't know. Besides the whole discussion of music being haram or whatever, I'm not talking about that. We're not scholars or any we're not study up on fiqh or anything. But the fact that he said that, when I heard it, I was like, yo, this is so cool. This is good representation. But Lupe Fiasco is not the perfect Muslim. Even in recent Twitter controversy he's been having, a lot of people are hating on him. But it was just cool to see that. And just because you're Muslim in the mainstream doesn't mean that you have to show yourself as this perfect, buttoned up Muslim all the time. You just be yourself, and that's just what it is. You can't expect someone to be perfect, especially in the limelight. People are sinners everywhere. You and I are sinners. Everyone is a sinner. But they're in the limelight all the time. They have these outside pressures. We should be supporting them in every way we can. If we have an issue with what they're showing on screen, what they're saying in their lyrics, we should, people who actually know them should advise them, not us. We shouldn't go on Twitter and just spit into the ether. Lupe Fiasco's haram, man. This is messed up. You shouldn't be saying that. And he's never gonna read it. It's just out there. You're just talking about him. That's all you're doing. You're not doing anything productive while doing that. So if you have a problem with Lupe Fiasco, or anything, I'm sure there are ways to reach out to him that you can. I mean, he's from Chicago. We're in Chicago right now. The Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation. I can probably find 1 or 2 degrees to get to Lupe Fiasco if we actually wanted to talk to him, right? Yeah. But I'm not gonna mess with that kind of thing. Whatever people do in their lives, whatever they're doing in their artwork, it's them. Whatever sins they're accumulating, whatever sins they're not accumulating, whatever good deeds they're accumulating, that's on them. That's not me. So that's what I think about Muslims in mainstream media.
Okay, so I think, us talking about Muslims in mainstream media might be a little bit too vague on the subject that I'm kind of referring to. And that's when Muslims are trying to represent a view or an aspect of Islam via especially TV and movie representation. It just hits different. It's different. You know what I mean?
Visual representation.
Yeah, visual representation. It's very different. So, so let's talk about, some recent examples of things that we've watched. So some of off the top of my head, Rami, Mo, and Miss Marvel. So Miss Marvel, honestly, even Mo, the central experience wasn't about being Muslim at all. That was kind of the side, not even a side plot. It's just they happen to be Muslim and they're doing a whole different thing. I think Miss Marvel, it's a Disney show. They did the best they could. They did have Muslim writers in there. So, that's, I'm sure even if there was a Muslim writer that was trying to fix things, there's only so much you can do, especially in a big corporation like that. But, let's start talking about Mo, for example. What responsibility does he have, as the writer of his show? to show Muslims in a certain viewpoint. And I understand it's not like his fault that we have such little representation that this matters so much. It's not his fault. And, you know, I feel like if he made the same TV show in like a Muslim country, I mean, I don't know if it'd get approved, but, you know, like no one would care. No one would be like, oh, he kissed someone on TV. Like, why would he do that? You know, but like in this context, it's like, man, we have such little representation. It matters a lot, you know? So with Mo, I know like I guess like some of it was just like there were scenes where I was like, you know, like this is such a good show. I love the story and everything about it, and I think it's a very realistic, you know, view on like a random like Muslim guy like having this, you know, these issues. But there were scenes where I'm like, well, what does this have to do with the plot point? Like, why do we have to see this? And he knows he's, you know, like I mean, no matter what, like no matter what he thinks or what his plan was, this was going to be a mainly like Muslim audience. You know what I mean? No, Muslims are going to watch that show. Like a lot of Muslims.
A lot of Muslims were going to watch it. But I wouldn't say the majority of the people watching a show are Muslim.
No, of course not. No, a majority of Muslims can't be any demographic, like unless it's like, you know, very specific, you know. So that's the thing though, is like he does know like a big audience of his and a big following, and a big reason why he is the status he is from, you know, the backs of Muslim fans. So why is he showing like a scene where he like is kissing this person? Like why is it necessary in that episode? It added nothing to the plot. I watched it all the way till the end. There was, if you had told me, oh, that scene didn't actually exist, it wouldn't have changed anything about the show. And I'm not even saying like, you know, anything else that he's doing, I don't like, that's not the point. But it's like, why are you showing that scene to people that you know, like are trying to avoid that kind of stuff, or like, you know, it's just really unnecessary to your storyline.
Okay, so I think, you know, let's backtrack a little bit. When you say like when you say the demographic of the show or whatever, like people watching the show, or like it's a lot of Muslims are watching it, you know, a lot of Muslims are watching it, your fan base is like a lot of Muslims are, you know, there. So why are you, you know, showing these things? Well, I don't know what his actual fan base demographic is, right? But I would say that majority of it is non-Muslim. There's no way that there would be a mainstream, you know, person getting a Netflix special if the majority of their fans are Muslim. So that's number one. And so then you have to think, okay, who is he? What is the show serving? Is it serving an audience that watches shows that are not run by Muslims, or not written by Muslims, or created by Muslims? So he's basically playing in a game where everyone's playing by a different set of rules. So, you know, whatever his justification is, whatever, you know, he had to do, but it might have been the case where the show never would have gotten approved if he didn't include certain things like that. I mean, it's interesting you bring up like the scene that he, you know, kisses a girl. Is it because like, oh, he's like he's, because they also show him doing drugs in the show. So, well, like we didn't bring up that point, but I guess like the drugs are assumed to be fake. So like, oh, he's just acting doing drugs, but he's clearly kissing a girl. So I don't know. I mean, like I think like I think in today's day and age in America, mainstream media in America, you're not going to get a show approved unless you have something like that included. There's a show from the UK, Man Like Mobeen, where it doesn't have anything like that. I don't even think he has like a love interest in the show at all, like ever, in the 3 seasons that I've seen. So, but that show is from the UK, and I think things go differently there than over here. I think we're much more like deviant here as a society, and I think like people expect a certain thing when they turn on TV. I mean, people are like the most like famous show of the last like 10 years, Game of Thrones. Like they were literally showing like incest sex scenes, you know, and people were just watching it. That's like what people are watching now. So like you need, like, I think in order to be on TV in America, you need to show like you kissing a girl at least, or kissing a guy.
Okay, so okay. I think I'm glad you touched on Man Like Mobeen. I feel like, you know, when I was watching that, So I don't know what the Twitter conversation was of that because we watched it way late in the game, so we weren't really part of it. But I thought that was actually like a really I'm not going to say it's a good representation. Obviously, those characters were flawed, but it's like, they weren't, they didn't hit on any of the like stereotypical like tropes, and it was like this older brother trying to take care of his sister and this like,
I mean, the show is based in Birmingham, and
Yeah.
you know what Birmingham's like,
Yeah.
right? I've never been there, but I've heard that it's just a lot of Muslims. So like, they're just normal people there.
Yeah.
It's not
So why can't we have that though in
like
America?
where in America is there a city where it's just Muslims? Like Dearborn? Maybe
Yeah.
there'll be a show that like is based in Dearborn one day, but
Yeah.
I don't
think they actually tried to have that once, but
Yeah, but like it's just like, if I have a show in Chicago, based in Chicago, and like a Muslim is the main character, he's gonna be surrounded by non-Muslims, or like for the majority of the time, or he's gonna be with his like close Muslim friend group. I don't know, man, and I think like it's there's like saying like art imitates life, like they're writing from their experiences, like when Mo is writing his show, it literally like loosely based on his life.
And I don't have like that's not the point though. The my point isn't like I want to see a perfect Muslim on TV. I think like it's like I'm fine with watching these different experiences. It's not the fact that he has this girlfriend at all. I mean, that's a very realistic depiction of a Muslim man in America, right? It's the fact that he has to show this.
Yeah, that's the thing though. What I'm saying is what conflict can a Muslim character have that is acceptable for the Muslims who get upset about Mo, Rami, and all these other shows like Miss Marvel.
They can have any. He could have had the conflict with the girl. You just don't have to show that stuff. Okay.
No, I think even okay. I would argue even if it was just like they didn't show anything, it would just be like, why is he in a relationship with a non-Muslim? Why is it implied that there's premarital sex going on? What kind of Muslim representation is this? That's what I don't think anyone will ever be satisfied. And that's my point. I don't think anyone will ever be satisfied with Muslim representation on TV. And I think that's fine. You don't have to watch it. And I don't think as a Muslim, like if you are a certain if you're a Muslim who's like pursuing the arts and you want to stay true to your deen the whole time, the mainstream media is not for you. You need to be an independent artist. I think so. That's what I think. Like otherwise you're gonna have to sacrifice something. It's a losing game. Like Hollywood, the way that some people talk about it is like it's literally like devilish. So why are we going into the belly of the beast? There's no reason. Like the only like you can't be getting mad at these people for doing that. Like they're just playing the game that they have to. Okay, like if you're gonna watch TV, you should be happy that there's any kind of Muslim representation. There's people who are mad at like these shows and then they watch Game of Thrones, like, and they won't skip through the sex scenes that show full on nudity, and then they'll be like, well, why is he kissing a girl who's fully clothed? Like, yo, chill out. Like, why are you not watching Game of Thrones? Like, why are you watching this show?
So okay, that's the thing though, is it's like when if you go to a masjid and some people get like flabbergasted about like a mixed event right at a masjid that like they don't think is appropriate, but these people are still fine with like going to parties outside of the masjid that are mixed, right? It's not the fact that it's mixed or whatever, it's just the fact that this is not the environment, or like we should keep like certain environments different, so
yeah, but like Hulu and Netflix are in their own environment.
But then why are you making okay? So
no, like the argument should be like, okay, the Muslims who are complaining and won't watch those shows, or like are like they want that kind of representation where it's like, oh, there's no kissing, there's nothing, there's no like negative stereotype of Muslims on TV. Then you need to go and do your own thing. That's what I think. You need to go create your own production company and like invest in it, find investors. You can't be like this is created for the mainstream, and the mainstream in America is non-Muslim. You think non-Muslims are going to sit around like, oh wait, what happened? They cut off the bedroom scene. Like, they're going to be confused. They're going to be like, did he kill her? What happened? Like, this is like, the way people operate in America. So like we're playing a losing game when you're expecting like, oh, Mo and Rami to just be like, oh, we're going to be like perfectly clean, perfectly this, perfectly that. I mean, I don't know.
So with Rami, right? This is a show about a Muslim guy. That is what he is characterized as. He's a Muslim guy and he is going through his journey as a Muslim. And I think I think something that people something that's lost on them, like he makes it a little bit more obvious in the later seasons, but the first few seasons, I think it's lost on them that like he's representing a bad guy. Like he is not, like he is like
the anti-hero.
Yeah. Like you should not be on his side. And I think people get lost in that and they're like, wait, is he like trying to promote the stuff he does? Like, no, he's supposed to be a bad person. And I think he does a good job of showing like normal Muslims around him. And I think he does a fine job with that. That's not the issue. The issue is like some of the things that he shows is so like off the bat like wild and unnecessary, you know, like even in the standards of like an American TV show. Like I know, like, you know, part of it is like, oh, controversy will like make people talk about the show, but it's like at what, again, I'm like going back to at what point though are these people like still responsible for what other Muslims are consuming?
You're saying like what Rami is responsible for? Or?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so for example, right, like I'm seeing, okay, I'm done watching Man Like Mubin, and then I see the show like right after that's recommended to me. It's Rami, and I'm like, oh, cool, another Muslim, you know, that's like living in a non-Muslim country. Let's watch it, and then you know I see the scenes that I'm like that he has in his episodes, and you're just like, why, like. What is this? Like, why was this necessary?
Okay, so in this scenario, you are subscribed to Netflix or Hulu or whatever.
Yes.
And the only shows you are watching are Muslim shows?
I am not saying that. I'm not saying that. Like, the thing is, it's not... I'm not talking about the responsibility of the viewer right now. Okay? I understand. I am responsible for what I consume. Yeah. And that is its own thing, right?
Yeah.
That's not the thing. I'm talking about, like... the responsibility of these creators that are on these large platforms that they know like millions of Muslims are going to watch. And a lot of these Muslims don't watch these shows like Game of Thrones. They won't watch a lot of these shows. Maybe they subscribe specifically because they saw a Muslim person like, you know, having this big show online, right? And so then like they're exposed to this stuff and they're like, why was this necessary at all? Like, what does this have to do with his experience or like anything about like what his goal was in the show, you know? Like, why are these like, you know, like random, like off the bat scenes, like just necessary at all? Okay. And I think that's what the people are having problems with. Like, I think there are some conversations that like, I mean, like in some way, I think they're even promoting sinning, but I actually think they're very like honest, refreshing conversations. Like, I think they were, you know, some of the conversations were like, oh, wow, like I've never actually heard people talk about this. But in terms of like what they're showing,
I mean, I think the show is designed to make the viewer uncomfortable. That's why there's scenes like that. So his character is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. I think that's the whole point. Whatever justification he has, it's on him. That's what I'm saying. This is all him and like, you know, his, you know, teacher who may be telling him whatever. Like, this is not on us. Like, if you are learned a certain different way and like you're not comfortable with what you're watching, you don't have to watch it. That's just the bottom line. Whatever he's doing, and those actions are on him, whether they're good deeds, bad deeds. You're not gonna be like asked on the day of judgment or whatever, like why was this periphery Muslim celebrity in America making this show while you're in America? Like, I don't think that's your responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. But at some point though, like, you know, we're talking about like representation, and I do think the way we react to representation does matter.
Okay, but like I think a lot of people enjoyed it. A lot of people liked Rami. They're just not loud about it.
Yeah.
A lot of people related to the story in Rami, where it's like the journey of like trying to find your religion and how to practice and like how to come to terms with some doubts you may have, all these things. I think that's like a really real struggle, and I think seeing it on screen is like, for me, it's like really refreshing to see versus all the other things that, you know, we may watch on TV. So, and you know, of course, like his character is not someone that like I'm like, oh, I would be friends with him, but like it's still something like, oh, I see like that characteristic. I know that characteristic. It's in me. Like I'm selfish too. I see that. That's what the show is. I think it's a great show. There's a reason why it's getting so many awards, all these like nominations. Like it's a great show, and I think him making a show as a Muslim that's like excellent shows that Muslims can hang with, Hollywood, or like they can create shows. So maybe he gets a second chance. He gets he gets an opportunity to make another show or another he gets to make a movie. Maybe he changes his tune. Maybe he's like, hey, I have leverage now. I can take out certain things that I'm not comfortable with. And like, whatever. That's all. Like, I don't know. I'm not judging his actions, and none of us should. And the people who are Twitter who do are just like, they're clowns. I think, they're the worst of the worst. They're even worse than what they think they're judging.
Why do you say that?
Because you're not even talking to him. You're just talking about him, and you're not doing anything productive. Like, it's not that hard to reach out to someone in this day and age. Like, if you actually have something to say to them, like, hey, this hurt me. Like, you showing this on screen, like, it embarrassed me in front of my mom or whatever. Like, oh, I showed my mom this show, and then the first, like, I think in the first 10 minutes, there's like a very uncomfortable scene that you don't have to put it on Twitter. Like, just go talk to him. It's not that hard to find him. You could literally find him anywhere. I even got to meet him. Like, it's not that hard to like find these people. It's like this day and age. So like all they're doing is they're fishing for likes and they're fishing for retweets. That's all these people do. They don't care about what's actually going on. If they actually did, they would do something about it. But they don't do anything. They just tweet until their thumbs fall off. Like, there's nothing, like, if they had an actual solution, then I would be like, oh, okay, like they're doing something. They're creating their own production company. But they're not. They're just complaining and then turning on Game of Thrones. That's all they're doing.
So I think your like point is valid, and I think the criticism is also valid of these people. But I think that what they're saying is also, I mean, in their own way, it's true. But you bring up a good point about how, like, regardless of what you're thinking about these people, and like, or like how they're not specifically showing the kind of Islam you want, it is important that we as Muslims support the Muslims who have made it. And regardless of what you think about these shows, I do think it's important to still support them in some way. Like, again, like, we don't know what their future projects are.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that criticism is unwarranted. You can obviously criticize anyone you want, but there's a way to do it, I don't think the way to do it is to spit and, like, say negative things about your Muslim brother or sister on Twitter. Like, that's not the way to do it. I don't think that's productive. That doesn't get anything done. So I don't. That's his number one reason not way to do it. Like, there may be a thing like, hey, you can say this. This is what I would be like okay with if I saw on Twitter. Hey, just for people who want to watch Rami, just to know, like, it's not like a Muslim friendly show. Like, so don't watch it in front of your parents type stuff. It is like, what it is. It's a Hulu show. It's on mainstream media. So like, you're gonna get what you get on a Hulu show with Rami. Like, that's what it is. Like, you're watching a medium where Hulu has all kinds of shows. Dave, Atlanta, and Rami, like, they're all from the same place, like same people, like up to the production company making them. So you have to know what you're getting. That's fine. Don't be like, but don't go and be like, oh, Rami's this, Rami's that. He's doing bad things. Like, no, just go talk to him. It's not that hard. Like, that's why, I mean, that's what I think. Like I can't imagine like what. Like, I don't know how he handles it, but like, I would just be like very, like, I know I wouldn't be able to handle it. I would get so frustrated and angry I'm getting frustrated and angry, and I'm not even like Rami.
It's not even your show.
It's not even my show. And I personally disagree with certain things. Like, yeah, maybe he shouldn't have shown that, but like, I'm not going to go and yell about it and like, tell people like, Rami's this kind of person because he made this show. Like, no, I'm never going to say anything bad about him. Yeah.
I will say, like, since we've started having these conversations, something that has changed and something I'm a little bit more aware of is I do now give things chances before immediately jumping the gun on judgment. And now that I'm like so aware that I used to do this, now I see other people do this, and it's like a lot more like,
Yeah, there's a movie that came out on Apple TV, I think like 2 years ago. I don't know what it was. It might have been before we got married. It was written and directed by, I think, Minhal Baig, this Muslim woman. I think she's from Chicago. So the trailer came out. Everyone was like, "Oh, cool! A story about a Muslim girl, coming of age story about a Muslim girl." And the people
I
watch
remember this
people
trailer.
watch the trailer, and then they were like trashing this woman over a trailer, and they were like, well, she's playing into the, oh, of course the brown girl is gonna go in with the white guy because there was a white guy in the trailer. Of course the brown girl is gonna do this, she's gonna do that, she's gonna leave her religion, she's gonna do that, like. And they just base this off a 2 minute trailer, which is like 1/100th of the movie. So like that's what I'm getting at. Like, why? Like, I watched the movie when it actually came out, and all of those things people were saying about her were false. About what the movie was gonna be about. This is false. That's not what the movie is about. That's not what the movie ended up being about. So like, you should give things a chance before you at least judge them. Or at least talk about them on Twitter on a public platform. Like, think about how crazy Twitter is. It's like me getting onto our balcony and just yelling like my thoughts. Like, that's what you're doing. Like, you need to be like more measured and with your approach. Like, you can't just talk crap about people. Like, that's not how it works. In the real world, if I like talk crap about people, they punch me in the face. Like, you can't do that. You need to be more measured with your approach, more friendly, more like gentle with your approach. That's how you're supposed to do it. I don't understand this whole like, just trashing these like celebrities or public figures in the Muslim community. Like, you can easily talk to any of them. You can email them. You can DM them, and they read these things. Like,
Yeah, wait. We're not condoning though, like harassing actual people. Like,
not harassing, just like
if it's
you
not
have
constructive, don't.
if you don't have if you have something to say, like hey man, like this really upset me. Like, instead of like going on Twitter and like venting your frustrations to nobody and just like spreading, thoughts about someone else to everyone who follows you, like, maybe just like, hey, send a DM, or hey, like, you can find his email, you can send an email. Like, it's not that hard. Or like, go to his shows. He talks to his fans after shows. You can talk to him then. Like, all these things. Like, you don't have to like just like spit out things into the ether and just get some likes.
Yeah, I will say, when I've heard people like I've noticed a trend, like the loudest people are usually the people who never ended up actually watching, what they're talking about. And I have noticed that with Rami, like everyone that has like a very strong, like visceral reaction to it has never watched more than like an episode or two, and they don't actually know the full story. But the things that they are criticizing, though, I again, I still think are valid.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
though, and I'm not saying that these people, these Muslim public figures, are like immune to criticism. Of course, you can criticize them, but there's a way to do it. And like, I'm getting at, I think maybe you probably agree, like, you shouldn't go on Twitter and talk crap about people. You can say things like, hey, like, write a review on the show. I didn't like the show because XYZ, but you can't talk about Rami the person, or even like just like, like people who are involved with the show. All these things are.
So your problem isn't that people are like, hey, Rami's show, like the show Rami was, problematic, and I didn't like that they did this, or they showed this person in this way. Your problem is when people go on Twitter and they're like, Rami's a bad Muslim. Like, that's the issue?
I think that's what the majority of these criticisms get to.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, like, when you talk about, anyone centered around a religion, it's not just about, like, oh, there's diversity in religion. There's also a huge diversity in how people practice religion. So, like, even not even talking about how like I practice, like every Muslim I have seen around me, I would say like 95% of that comes from, like my masjid that my parents chose because it was the way that they practice. And like every masjid I've been to my whole life, all the Muslims I've been surrounded by have always been very similar to me so I mean, which also means they were similar to my parents. And then now what's, like I'm choosing masjids that are similar to how I practice. So it just goes on. Like I recognize that I'm around a very small minority of Muslims and how they practice, and my Islam and like how I think, like, Muslims, like this is what a Muslim representation is, could be very, very different than someone else who's had a very different experience than me, goes to different masjids, or, like just has a family who doesn't go to masjids, but they identify as Muslim. So I think a big point is like we need to understand that it's not just about diversity in writers' rooms in terms of like, faith. It's also like in terms of practicing too, because I do think that could actually play a big role.
I agree with you. And to that, I would say that the Muslims who are like, you'd say from your background or whatever, your type of masjid or whatever, like they need to get to work. Like you can't just enter a writer's room. You need to put in the work. Like you need to go do stand up. You need to go write your own sketches. You need to go and write your own pilots. Like you need to go to writing school. All these things. Like that's what you need to go do. You can't, like, it's just not going to happen. But I think here's what I think. I think the people from those communities, like the ones that you and I come from, were very much like geared towards like
only certain paths,
certain practical careers that you should do. And who knows, like, when we're going to see that. I mean, it's coming down the pipe, but I don't think it's going to be anytime soon.
Yeah.
And also, like, it's going to be the challenge of, like, okay, how do I take the struggle of the Muslim who's, like, from, the masjids that you and I attend, how do we take that and make it appealing, the struggles, to mainstream media?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. Like, what can you show that isn't going to be like, oh, this is haram? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, if we're being honest, like people who have like, if it's going to be a show centered around faith and representation of a faith, the most appealing dilemma that people like, the most appealing dilemma that you can write is someone struggling within their faith.
Yeah, I mean, Rami's show is just that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's struggling with his faith, but I don't think they ever compromise what Islam is on the show.
Yeah.
All they show is him being like a jackass. That's all it is, you know? So, like I think it does a good job in that sense. Like it doesn't go into, like, oh, Islam is weird because of this. It's
Mm-hmm.
always like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I fit into this religion? Like why am I struggling with like getting into this, you know?
Yeah. Another thing I liked about Rami though was and actually all these shows that we've been talking about is, with all of their weaknesses or issues, they did not play into any of the stereotypical tropes.
Yeah, no, I think Mo did a really good job of that. There was, yeah, like it was such a unique character, and there was never anything where you're like, oh, they have like the Arab guy with like the accent, saying Bebzi or something, like, it didn't have like that kind of stuff. So, no, I really appreciate the shows. They show a unique perspective on, like, I didn't even know, I don't know many people who came to America as refugees, and the people who did, they don't really like talking about it. So him showing it on screen was really cool for me to see, like, oh, like this is what it might have been like for my friend, who did go through something like this. So it's just eye opening. You get to see different perspectives of Muslim communities who may not, maybe not show up at the masjid that you and I went to or growing up or going to now. Like, you don't get to meet every kind of Muslim growing up. That's just like this. It's like I said, it's so diverse. It's such a diverse population in America.
Experience.
And it's such a diverse experience that you can't show all of it on one show.
Yeah.
So I think just more things are going to be coming. There's so many talented Muslims on the up and up, in comedy and in writing. So we're going to be seeing stuff that, like, a lot more people are going to be getting angry about on Twitter. And I'm going to be saying the same thing. You guys are even worse than them. So you're worse than what you think you're criticizing. So,
yeah. What do you think are the stereotypical tropes that even you think that you might end up complaining about? after watching?
Stereotypical. I don't know. Like, I guess like for a long time we were like, oh, the Muslim terrorist guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. It's not about like what is the point about complaining? You just don't watch it. Like the best thing you can do is not show support. You know, if you don't like a show, don't talk about it. Just don't watch it. That's all you have to do.
What I was getting at is like, okay, you know, that Apple TV movie. What was it called again?
Hala.
Yeah. You know, I like you were saying, you know, people started flipping out because it showed, you know, like her like possibly like liking a white boy.
Her talking to a white kid on a trailer. So everyone was like, oh my God.
Because the stereotype is
the brown girl goes with
the white guy, right? So, and I think there's like a list of them that people just.
Yeah, no, it like. It's one thing to be upset about the stereotype, but you didn't even watch the movie. You watched the trailer. Yeah. Like, if that's what happened in the movie, you can be like, hey, man, she played into the stereotype of a brown girl falling for the white guy. But that's not what happened. Yeah. Spoiler alert. But no one who didn't want to watch it didn't watch already. So, but, like, that's not what happened. So, I don't know. Like, if you see something on a trailer, doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in the movie. Like, that's the point of trailers, just to kind of leave you guessing on what's going to happen. So, I think, like, we have to understand where we live. You know, we live in America. When we're watching mainstream media, we're watching TV that's meant for non-Muslims. You have to understand that. Like, that's the only reason it's on TV is because it was made for non-Muslims. Like, it's not made for us. It's not made for us to watch as with my parents and like, you know, sit back on the couch. Like, no, it's made for white people basically. And I think when we understand that, like maybe people will show a little bit more mercy towards these artists and like what they're trying to do. It's an interesting story. You know, Christopher Nolan had the script for Dunkirk ready for over 20 years, but it was his pet project. He had to gain leverage of making like Memento, the Dark Knight series, Inception, Interstellar. He made all these films until he had the leverage to say, I want to make this film whether you approve it or not. And he got to do it. So maybe these guys are building leverage into something that they actually want to do. Yeah. And over time, like, you know, if you don't support it, whatever, you don't support the things that they're doing, you can advise them privately. It's not that hard to reach out to people. And if not, just don't talk to them or just don't watch it. You know, just leave it alone.
Yeah. And before you give, you know, especially the harsh judgments, actually make sure you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Too many people, man. Too many people with too many Twitter accounts, you know. All these eggheads.
All right. Well, I think that about covers it.
Yeah.
You need to like calm down.
I need to calm down. I'm like sweating. The things I do to defend these Muslims, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think your criticism is valid, and I from like the conversations that, you know, we've had, I've definitely changed my viewpoint a lot in terms of, you know, just being patient before like, you know, having like casting, you know, any kind of like criticism about something, especially before I've actually seen it. We just wanted to talk about this because we've had this conversation for like years now. So I'm glad we finally got to.
We've had this conversation in private many times. But
yeah.
Now I'm glad
he's actually been restrained this conversation.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm going to go off when the camera goes off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know if, you know, you enjoyed this topic, what your thoughts were, if you disagreed with anything that Adil was saying. But yeah, we would really like your feedback, and send us any questions or comments.
Please let us know if you want us to talk about anything else, if you have any questions, if you know how much you disagree with us and how much you agree with us. It's all good. You can DM us. Don't write about us on Twitter, you know. It's easy. We only have like 100 followers. Okay?
We read all the DMs.
We read everything.
Every comment, all of them.
I read it like 3 times, okay? So like you don't have to go on Twitter and talk crap about us.
Yeah.
It's not like any of you were, but if you were planning on it.
Okay.
All right.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.